Marcus's fingers burned as he clawed at the twisted metal pinning Mary beneath the crashed helicopter. Flames licked closer, 30 seconds, maybe less. The Hells Angels' sister screamed, her ribs cracking under the weight. "Run, kid!" She choked out, blood pooling at her lips. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they'd never make it in time. Marcus was 14, homeless, 90 pounds soaking wet. The rotor blade groaned above them, ready to collapse and crush them both. Behind him, her brother Reaper's motorcycle roared closer, but would he arrive before the fuel tank exploded? Marcus made his choice, wedging his bony shoulder under scorching steel. Welcome to Hells Angels family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because this story will touch your heart in ways you won't expect. To my faithful subscribers who've been here from the beginning, may God continue to bless you abundantly. Before we dive in, let's lift this moment up in prayer. Heavenly Father, I come before you asking for your divine protection over everyone watching right now. Bless their families, Lord. Heal their bodies, provide for their needs, and give them peace that surpasses all understanding. Surround them with your favor and let your presence be felt in their lives today. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Now, what you're about to witness is how 14-year-old homeless Marcus became a hero when a helicopter crashed, betrayal struck from within, and one act of courage saved 200 lives. The helicopter's tail rotor screamed its final rotation before slamming into the Indiana cornfield, and Marcus felt his entire body lift off the ground from the impact shockwave. Metal shrieked against metal. Glass exploded outward in a glittering cloud that caught the moonlight like 1,000 falling stars. He'd been walking the shoulder of Route 41 for the past 2 hours, thumb out for a ride that would never come, when the aircraft dropped from the sky like a wounded bird. It cartwheeled once, twice, 3 times. Each rotation sent debris spiraling outward in deadly arcs. The final impact happened 200 yards deep into the cornfield, crushing stalks that had stood 8 feet tall just seconds before. The fireball that followed turned midnight into noon, painting the landscape in violent shades of orange and red. Marcus ran toward it, not away, toward, because that's what 6 months of homelessness in Chicago had taught him. When everyone else runs from disaster, that's when you find what they leave behind. Food, phones, cash, maybe a wallet someone dropped in their panic. Survival wasn't pretty, and 14-year-old kids didn't get to be heroes in the real world. But when he reached the wreckage and saw her pinned beneath the crushed cockpit frame, everything changed. Blood pooled dark against her scrubs, spreading outward in a widening circle that reflected the firelight. Mary, the nurse who'd let him sleep on her couch for 3 weeks, who'd fed him without asking the questions that would have sent him back to foster care, who'd looked at him like he was human instead of trash. She was dying, and the fire was spreading fast. Marcus grabbed the metal strut crushing her torso and pulled with everything he had. His palms sizzled against superheated steel. The pain shot up his arms like lightning, white-hot and all-consuming. He screamed, but didn't let go. Couldn't let go. The frame shifted an inch, maybe less. Mary's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with shock. "Run," she choked out, blood bubbling at her lips with each word. "Kid, you gotta run." He pulled harder. Skin tore from his hands, peeling away in sheets. The smell of burning hair, his own, filled his nostrils, mixing with the acrid stench of jet fuel and melting plastic. Another inch. "Shut up," Marcus gasped, wedging his bony shoulder under the strut, using his 90-pound frame as a lever. Physics he'd learned in a classroom 2 years ago came back to him, back when he still had a mother and a bedroom and a life that wasn't this endless nightmare of shelters and streets. The metal groaned, gave, shifted just enough. He hooked his arms under Mary's shoulders and dragged her backward through shattered glass and twisted cables, her screams cutting through the roar of flames like a knife. Her weight felt impossible, dead weight, but adrenaline made him strong in ways his scrawny body had never been before. They cleared the wreckage with seconds to spare. The fuel tank detonated with a concussive force that threw them both into the dirt like ragdolls. Marcus felt his ribs compress, felt the air punched from his lungs. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. The world sounded underwater, muffled and distant. He crawled on hands and knees to where Mary lay crumpled in the churned earth, her chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate gasps. Her right leg bent at an angle legs shouldn't bend. Her face had gone gray. 3 ribs at least, probably punctured lung. He'd seen enough street violence in 6 months to recognize critical injuries when he saw them. She had minutes, not hours. Marcus. Her hand found his wrist, grip stronger than it should be for someone half dead. Listen to me. Her eyes cleared suddenly, focused with an intensity that didn't match her broken body. This wasn't an accident. The words hit him harder than the explosion had. What? Witness protection, she whispered, each word costing her something. 2 years. I testified, pharmaceutical executive, falsified FDA approvals, killed my father with experimental drugs. She coughed, crimson spraying from her lips. Trial resumes, next month in Atlanta. They sabotaged the helicopter. They're coming to finish it. Marcus's stomach dropped through the ground. The reality crashed over him like freezing water in January. She'd saved him, fed him, gave him shelter, but she'd also used him. A homeless kid made the perfect cover, the perfect lookout, the perfect expendable asset who wouldn't ask questions. The anger should have come, hot and righteous. But all he felt was hollow. Who's coming? Headlights appeared in the distance. 2 sets, maybe 3, cutting through the smoke from the access road a quarter-mile east. Coming fast, engines growling. Mary's face went white as paper. Could be marshals. Could be them. Her fingers dug into his arm with desperate strength. But Marcus, there's something worse. Something I never told you. She coughed again, body convulsing. If my brother finds me here, we're both dead. Your brother? He'd never heard her mention family. Not once in 3 weeks of late-night conversations in her tiny Lincoln Park studio. Reaper, top member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club. He thinks I abandoned him when I vanished. Her breath came in rattles now, wet and labored. He thinks I betrayed our family. The people I testified against. They sent him fabricated proof I was meeting with rival gang members. Made it look like I was selling intelligence on the Angels' operations. She gasped, fighting for air. He's been hunting me for 2 years across 12 states. If he finds me alive. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The approaching vehicles were closer now, headlights separating into distinct beams. Marcus could make out the shapes. 3 black SUVs, government grade, windows tinted dark. They weren't speeding anymore. They'd slowed to a predatory crawl. Stalking. Hunting. Mary's blood soaked through his shredded shirt where he held pressure on her side. Warm and sticky. He could run right now. Should run. Disappear into the cornfield and hitchhike north to Gary or Fort Wayne. Vanish the way he'd vanished from his last foster placement 6 months ago. She'd lied to him. Used him. Kept him close because damaged kids don't ask questions and don't have people who'll come looking when they disappear. But she'd also fed him when he was starving on Michigan Avenue in November. Given him a warm place to sleep when frost was killing homeless teenagers across Cook County. Taught him that maybe, just maybe, not every adult in the world would hurt him. The SUVs were 300 yards out now, moving in formation. Marcus made his choice. I'm not leaving you. You stupid kid. I said I'm not leaving. His voice cracked, 14 years old and terrified and absolutely certain for the first time in 6 months. Then he heard it. Distant at first, barely audible over the crackling fire. Then growing. Building. Like thunder rolling across the flatlands. Except thunder didn't sound like this. Thunder didn't shake the ground beneath your feet. Engines. Dozens of them. Motorcycles. The sound built into a roar that vibrated in Marcus's chest, coming from the west on Highway 41. Headlights crested the distant rise, forming a river of light that stretched back to the horizon as far as he could see. Mary's entire body went rigid beneath his hands. Oh God! Her voice broke into something Marcus had never heard from her before. Pure, primal terror. Oh God, he found me. The motorcycles poured over the rise like a flood, 50, 70, 100, more still coming behind them in an endless stream. They left the highway and roared onto the access road, forming a wall of chrome and leather and barely contained fury between the crash site and the approaching SUVs. The lead bike was a massive chopper with extended forks and a human skull painted on the fuel tank, its empty eye sockets seeming to stare directly at Marcus. It stopped 30 feet from where Marcus crouched over Mary, engine cutting to silence. The sudden quiet felt deafening. The rider dismounted slowly, deliberately. He stood 6'4", wearing a leather vest covered in patches Marcus recognized from news reports and police warnings plastered across every shelter in Chicago. Hell's Angels. Top rocker. The territorial bottom rocker read, Illinois. The man's face was hidden behind a full beard streaked with gray and covered in road dust, but his eyes, pale blue, burning with something between relief and murderous rage, locked onto Mary like a predator spotting wounded prey. "Hello, sister." Reaper's voice carried across the blood-soaked ground, low and dangerous. "We need to talk. Subscribe now. What happens next will shock you. Comment below. Where are you watching from?" Behind Reaper, 500 motorcycles sat idling in perfect military formation, their riders motionless as statues. Waiting. Watching. The black SUVs stopped at the perimeter, forming their own line. Doors opened in unison. Men in tactical gear emerged, weapons visible on their hips, but not raised. Not yet. Marcus felt Mary trembling violently beneath his hands, felt her heartbeat stuttering against his palm like a dying bird. She was looking at her brother with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Fear, yes, but something else too. Regret, longing, love mixed with terror. Reaper took one step forward. The entire world held its breath. Reaper's boots crunched through broken glass as he crossed the distance between his motorcycle and his dying sister, each step deliberate and heavy with unspoken fury. 500 engines idled behind him in perfect synchronization, a mechanical heartbeat that pulsed through the scorched earth and vibrated in Marcus's bones. He felt each footstep like an earthquake, felt Mary's body go rigid with terror beneath his blood-soaked hands. The massive biker stopped 10 feet away, towering over them both like a monument to violence. Up close, Marcus could see details that made his stomach twist. The scars crossing Reaper's knuckles, white lines against sun-damaged skin that told stories of 100 fights. Prison tattoos climbing his neck, crude, done with improvised needles and cell blocks where survival meant being harder than everyone else. The way his jaw clenched and unclenched rhythmically, like he was physically restraining himself from wrapping those scarred hands around someone's throat. His pale blue eyes, the same shade as Mary's, Marcus realized with a jolt, burned with something beyond anger. Betrayal. Grief. A wound 2 years old that had never stopped bleeding. 2 years. Reaper's voice came out raw, scraped over gravel. 2 years I searched every city from Seattle to Miami, Portland, Denver, New Orleans, called in every favor I'd banked in 20 years of writing, burned every bridge with clubs from coast to coast asking if anyone had seen you. He took another step closer. "And you were in Chicago the whole goddamn time." His eyes shifted to Marcus, and the weight of that stare felt like being crushed under the helicopter all over again. "With this kid." "It wasn't like that," Mary gasped, blood staining her teeth, making her words wet and desperate. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Reaper's laugh held no humor, just jagged edges that cut. "You vanished the night before Dad's funeral. Left me to bury him alone in that veterans' cemetery in Joliet. Left me to stand there in the rain and answer questions from 300 brothers who thought you'd turned rat." His voice cracked on the last word. "Because I did turn rat." Mary's shout cost her everything, body convulsing with pain that made Marcus instinctively press harder on her wounds. "I testified against Thornton Pharmaceuticals. Against Executive VP Richard Marsh, the man who personally gave Dad those experimental CRISPR gene therapy drugs and watched him die from organ failure for profit. Someone had to make them pay." The SUV's doors slammed in unison, cutting her off with the finality of coffin lids. 6 men emerged from the vehicles, moving with the kind of precision that came from military training and federal budgets. They wore dark suits that probably cost more than Marcus had seen in his entire life. But he recognized the telltale bulges under their jackets were shoulder holsters pressed against expensive fabric. Not marshals. Not regular police. Something else entirely. The lead man was lean and sharp-featured, maybe 50 years old, with salt and pepper hair cut in a style that screamed government service. He held a leather portfolio in one hand and moved with the confidence of someone used to being the smartest person in any room. His shoes, polished Oxfords, didn't even pick up dust as he walked. "Reaper." The man's voice carried natural authority, the kind you couldn't fake. "I'm Agent Carlson, Department of Justice, Criminal Division. We need Mary Brennan in federal custody immediately." Reaper didn't turn around, didn't break eye contact with his sister. "She's my blood. She's bleeding out in a cornfield. You can wait." "I'm afraid we can't." Carlson opened the portfolio with practiced efficiency, pulling out an 8x10 photograph printed on high-quality paper. He held it up so Reaper could see, angling it to catch the firelight. "Your sister isn't the victim she claims to be." Marcus caught a glimpse of the image. Mary sitting across a table from a heavily tattooed man in what looked like a dive bar. The man wore a leather vest covered in patches. Not Hell's Angels patches. Something different. A different color scheme. A different bottom rocker. "Mongols MC," Carlson said flatly, letting the words sink in like poison. "Your club's biggest enemy. 30-year blood feud. That photo was taken 4 months ago in Tucson, Arizona. Your sister met with their national vice president 3 separate times over 6 weeks." Marcus felt the temperature drop despite the fire still crackling behind them. Reaper's entire body went still in a way that terrified Marcus more than any violence could. It was the stillness of a predator deciding which prey to kill first. "You're lying. We have 12 documented meetings across 4 states. Carlson pulled out more photos, spreading them like playing cards in a deadly poker game. "Phoenix, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, Las Vegas. Phone records showing 63 calls to known Mongols members. Wire transfers totaling $42,000 deposited into an account under a false name we traced back to her." Each word landed like a physical blow. "She's been selling intelligence on Hell's Angels operations," Carlson continued, voice clinical and cold. "Territory maps, chapter locations, member identities, and criminal histories. Supply routes. Everything the Mongols would need to wage war against your club." "That's not true." Mary screamed, trying to sit up and failing, ribs grinding against each other in ways that made Marcus wince. "Reaper, listen to me. They're twisting everything. We also have this." Carlson produced a phone, expensive, probably government-issued, tapped the screen with one manicured finger, and held it out toward Reaper. Marcus couldn't see what played on that screen, but he watched Reaper's face transform in real time. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him gray beneath the road dust and beard. His hands curled into fists that shook with barely restrained fury, tendons standing out like cables about to snap. The audio from the phone carried across the silence, a woman's voice, unmistakably Mary's, discussing locations and names Marcus didn't recognize. "Is that your voice, Mary?" Reaper's words came out strangled, forced through a throat that seemed to be closing. "Talking about our Chicago chapter house location? About supply routes through Gary? About which brothers have outstanding warrants? It's fake. They doctored it." Mary's desperation climbed toward hysteria. "I was investigating them, not helping them. You have to believe me." Carlson smiled without warmth, without humanity. "The metadata is authentic. Digital forensics confirmed timestamps, encryption keys, GPS coordinates. The recordings match voice pattern analysis for Mary Brennan with 99.4% accuracy." He looked directly at Reaper, letting the silence stretch. "Your sister has been playing both sides. The pharmaceutical testimony was real, yes, but she used witness protection as cover to sell your club out to your worst enemies." Marcus felt Mary shaking violently beneath him, but he couldn't tell anymore if it was pain or rage or pure terror or all three mixed together. "Reaper, please." Her voice broke into fragments. "Our father, what they did to him. Don't." The single word cracked like a gunshot. Don't you dare use Dad right now. Don't you dare spit on his grave by invoking his name to cover your betrayal. Behind Reaper, several bikers had dismounted, boots hitting pavement in a ripple effect that spread through the formation. Hands moved to weapons, guns tucked in waistbands, knives strapped to belts. The tension ratcheted up notches, violence hanging in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. Marcus could taste it, metallic and sharp, mixing with the smoke and blood already coating his tongue. Carlson pressed his advantage like a prosecuting attorney closing for the kill. We're prepared to offer you a deal, Reaper. A way out of this mess that benefits everyone. He gestured broadly at the assembled bikers. Hand over Mary and any data she's stolen. Walk away clean. We'll make the evidence of your club's involvement disappear. Involvement in what? Reaper's eyes narrowed to slits. Interstate trafficking, racketeering, weapons charges, the usual RICO predicates. Carlson waved dismissively, like he was discussing parking tickets instead of federal charges carrying decades of prison time. We both know how this works. Give us Mary Brennan and whatever intelligence she's compromised. In exchange, the federal case we've been building against your Illinois charter for the past 18 months evaporates. Vanishes, like it never existed. The offer hung in the smoke-thick air between them. Like and subscribe now, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything. Marcus watched Reaper's face, watched him process the impossible choice. Loyalty to blood that had betrayed him, or loyalty to the brotherhood that had defined his entire adult life. 500 bikers waited in silence for his decision, engines still idling, ready to ride toward whatever hell their leader chose. A dying sister who maybe, possibly, probably sold them all out to their sworn enemies. Federal agents offering an exit from prosecution that could destroy their entire club. Reaper turned slowly, deliberately, boots scraping against gravel and broken glass, until he was looking directly down at Mary with those pale blue eyes that held nothing but ice. Is it true? His voice came out quiet, dangerous in its measured control. Did you sell us out? Mary's eyes filled with tears that cut clean tracks through the blood and soot covering her face. I would never. Is it true? Each word separated, distinct, final. No. I swear on Dad's grave, I was gathering evidence on the Mongols. Mary sobbed, the sound raw and desperate. They're the ones working with Thornton Pharmaceuticals. They're distributing something through contaminated motorcycle parts and fuel additives. I was trying to infiltrate their operation, trying to stop them before. Before what? Reaper demanded, voice rising. Before it killed you. The words exploded from Mary like she'd been holding them back for 2 years. Before it killed everyone in every charter from California to New York. The fuel additives are poisoned with a slow-acting neurotoxin. Symptoms start in 72 hours. Tremors, memory loss, organ failure. I've been trying to develop an antidote using Dad's medical records, but I needed to know who was distributing it, which supply chains were compromised. Enough. Carlson's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. Very creative story, Ms. Brennan. Full of drama and urgency. But we have hard evidence. Reaper has seen the evidence. Time to stop lying and face consequences. Marcus's hands were still pressed against Mary's side, fingers long since gone numb from pressure and cold and shock. His mind raced, trying to piece together truth from lies, but everything was spinning too fast, contradictions layering on contradictions. Reaper stared at his sister for a long moment that seemed to stretch into years. Then he looked back at Carlson, face unreadable. Show me everything. Every photo. Every recording. Every piece of evidence you have. Reaper, don't. Mary pleaded, reaching for him with one blood-covered hand. Shut up. The words hit her like a physical blow, and Marcus saw something break behind her eyes. You lost the right to explain when you disappeared for 2 years. When you left me standing alone at Dad's funeral while rain poured down and brothers asked me if my sister was a federal snitch. Carlson smiled, victorious, already tasting his win. Smart choice. He gestured to one of his men, a younger agent with wire-rimmed glasses who approached carrying a ruggedized laptop. Marcus felt something in his jacket pocket vibrate. He froze, every muscle locking up. He didn't own a phone. Hadn't owned one since his mother's boyfriend Marcus too. They'd shared a name, which somehow made the beatings worse. Had smashed it against a wall 8 months before she overdosed on fentanyl-laced heroin in a Motel 6 bathroom. The vibration came again, insistent, buzzing against his ribs. With trembling, blood-covered fingers that left crimson prints on the fabric, Marcus reached into his jacket. His hand closed around a smartphone he'd never seen before. Sleek. Expensive. Definitely not his. The kind of phone that cost more than he'd eaten in food over 6 months. The screen lit up, brightness painful in the darkness, with a text message from an unknown number. Tell them about the thumb drive in your jacket, kid, or I kill everyone you've ever spoken to. You have 60 seconds. Marcus's blood turned to ice water in his veins. His other hand moved almost involuntarily to his inner jacket pocket, the one he never used because it was too small for anything useful. His fingers found something small, plastic, rectangular, unmistakable. A thumb drive. Someone had planted evidence on him while he was unconscious from the explosion, or while he was dragging Mary from the wreckage, or, God, maybe even back in Chicago before they'd fled. Someone had framed him as Mary's accomplice, her co-conspirator, her 14-year-old bagman. And someone was watching them right this exact second. Marcus looked up slowly at the ring of motorcycles forming a perimeter, at the SUVs with their tinted windows, at the agents standing in formation, at Reaper's murderous face illuminated by firelight. 500 witnesses. Any one of them could be the person on the other end of that text message. Any one of them could be the one who'd set this entire nightmare in motion. The phone vibrated again. 50 seconds. I'm watching. Don't test me. His mouth went completely dry, tongue sticking to his teeth. If he revealed the drive, Reaper would think he was part of the betrayal, would think this homeless kid Mary had taken in was actually a plant, a spy, part of whatever conspiracy had torn his family apart. If he didn't reveal it, someone would start killing Mary. The nurses at Northwestern Memorial who'd smiled at him when Mary brought him by to wait in the break room. The shelter workers who'd given him blankets without making him fill out forms. Anyone he'd ever spoken to in 6 months on the streets. How many people was that? 50? 100? And this person, whoever they were, was serious enough to plant evidence, serious enough to be watching them right now in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. 40 seconds. Marcus's hand closed around the thumb drive, palms sweating despite the cold. Reaper was watching him now, those pale blue eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. His predator's instinct had picked up on Marcus's tension, on the way his body had gone rigid, on the way his eyes had gone wide. Kid. Reaper's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. What's in your pocket? Marcus's hand trembled violently as he pulled the thumb drive from his inner jacket pocket, the small plastic rectangle catching firelight and reflecting it back like a piece of damning evidence in a murder trial, which, he realized with sick, crawling certainty spreading through his gut, is exactly what it was meant to be. I don't know how this got here, Marcus said, voice shaking so badly the words almost didn't come out. I swear on everything. I've never seen it before tonight. Reaper moved with predatory speed that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. He crossed the distance between them in 2 massive strides, boots hammering the ground, and ripped the drive from Marcus's bloody fingers with enough force to nearly dislocate the boy's thumb. He held it up to the firelight like a prosecutor examining murder weapon evidence, turning it slowly, letting everyone see it. Where did you get this? Reaper's voice came out quiet, controlled, which made it infinitely more lethal than if he'd been shouting. And choose your next words very carefully, kid, because they might be your last. Someone planted it on me. I don't know when. Maybe when I was knocked out by the explosion. Maybe when I was dragging Mary out. Marcus fumbled for the smartphone still clutched in his other hand. Look at my phone. There's a text message. Someone threatened me, told me to reveal the drive, or they'd kill people. But when Marcus held up the smartphone with desperate urgency, the screen was completely blank. Dead. The message had vanished like it had never existed in the first place. leaving no trace in the message history, no record in the phone's memory, nothing but Marcus's desperate word against the physical proof currently in Reaper's scarred hand. Carlson stepped forward smoothly, hand extended with bureaucratic authority. "I'll take that evidence into federal custody. Like hell you will." Reaper pocketed the drive and turned to the younger agent with the laptop, the one with wire-rimmed glasses who'd been standing quietly at the perimeter. "Boot it up. Right now. I want to see what's on this thing." The agent hesitated, glancing at Carlson for permission. "Do it," Carlson said after a calculated pause, lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. The younger agent's fingers flew over the keyboard with practiced efficiency, connecting cables, pulling up programs, navigating through security protocols. 30 seconds later, 30 seconds that felt like 30 years to Marcus, the thumb drive's contents filled the laptop screen in neat, organized folders labeled by date and location. Phoenix_July 2025. Tucson_August 2025. Albuquerque_September 2025. Oklahoma_City_October 2025. Reaper leaned in close, scrolling through files with increasing speed, his breathing growing harsher with each click. His face drained of color with each open document, each revealed photograph, until he looked like a corpse animated through sheer force of rage and betrayal. Marcus couldn't see the screen clearly from where he still knelt beside Mary, hands pressed to her wounds, but he caught glimpses in the laptop's glow. Bank transfer receipts with routing numbers and account details. Encrypted email chains with headers showing Mary's name. Photographs of her in different cities, different bars, different parking lots, always with men whose faces were hard and tattooed and radiating danger. "Jesus Christ, Mary." Reaper's voice cracked down the middle like breaking ice. "Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, Las Vegas, Denver. You met with Mongols' leadership in 6 different states over 4 months. Wire transfers totaling $78,000 deposited into offshore accounts." His hands shook as he clicked through more files. Supply routes, chapter house locations, names of brothers with outstanding warrants. Our entire security structure. Each word came out strangled. "You gave them everything they'd need to destroy us." "Those are fabricated." Mary screamed with enough force to send fresh blood spraying from her lips. "Look at the metadata. Look at the digital timestamps." Someone doctored those images. But Reaper wasn't listening anymore, couldn't hear anything over the roaring in his ears. He scrolled through more photos, each one a knife twisting deeper. Mary shaking hands with a man whose vest displayed Mongols MC National VP in bold patches. Mary sharing drinks in a dimly lit bar with 3 men wearing enemy colors. Mary in a parking garage, handing over what looked like documents or a laptop to someone whose face was strategically shadowed. Mary standing outside a building Marcus recognized from news reports, Mongols' headquarters in Southern California. The evidence was overwhelming. Damning. Perfect. Too perfect. Marcus leaned forward despite the pain radiating from his ribs where he'd been kicked, squinting at the screen. Something nagged at him, some detail scratching at the back of his mind like a splinter he couldn't quite reach. He'd spent 6 months surviving on Chicago's streets by noticing things other people missed. Which alleys had working security cameras that actually recorded versus dummy cameras? Which store managers would call the cops versus which ones would just yell? Which subway cars had plainclothes police versus actual homeless people? Which details separated safety from a beatdown or worse? The timestamps. They were wrong. Not obviously, dramatically wrong, but subtly, carefully off in ways someone not paying attention would miss completely. "Wait," Marcus said, voice gaining strength. "Look at that photo, the one supposedly from Phoenix in July." Reaper's eyes snapped to him with lethal focus. "Mary's wearing a heavy winter jacket." Marcus continued, pointing with a blood-crusted finger. "And look at the brick wall behind her. There's snow melting at the base." "In Phoenix. In July." Reaper looked back at the screen, eyes narrowing. "And that one." Marcus pressed on, momentum building. "The Albuquerque shot from October. The trees in the background are in full summer foliage. Bright green, fully leafed. But by October in New Mexico, those trees would be. A fist crashed into Marcus's face with the force of a sledgehammer before he could finish the sentence. The impact sent him sprawling backward, head bouncing off the hard-packed earth. Stars exploded across his vision in violent bursts of white and red. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. The taste of copper blood flooded his mouth, mixing with the dried blood already coating his tongue from earlier. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, he heard a voice, rough, angry, belonging to one of Reaper's lieutenants. A massive man Marcus had noticed earlier, 6'6" at least, with shoulders like a linebacker and enforcer patched across his chest in bold letters. The kid's part of this. The lieutenant's voice boomed across the crash site. Are you all blind? Homeless kid shows up out of nowhere 3 weeks ago, gets close to Mary, coincidentally ends up on her helicopter when it crashes, and oh look, he's carrying evidence for her. Wake up, Reaper. He's her accomplice, her bagman. Before Marcus could roll away, the lieutenant's boot connected with his ribs with brutal precision. The air exploded from Marcus's lungs. Pain erupted across his chest. Something cracked, maybe broke. He curled into a protective ball, gasping like a fish drowning in air. Stop! Mary's scream tore through the chaos, raw and desperate. He's 14 years old. He's a child. He's innocent. Innocent. Carlson's voice dripped with theatrical sympathy, like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Ms. Brennan, your young friend was caught red-handed carrying classified intelligence documenting your espionage activities. That's conspiracy to commit espionage under federal statute 18 U.S.C. section 794. He's facing 25 years minimum in a federal penitentiary. Those aren't real federal agents. Mary's voice rose to hysteria, blood bubbling from her lips with each syllable, her broken body convulsing. Reaper, please, you have to listen to me. Look at their credentials. Real DOJ agents don't show up to crime scenes in blacked-out SUVs without backup units. They don't travel without radio contact to their field office. They don't offer to make active RICO investigations disappear like they're negotiating a parking ticket. Reaper's head snapped up from the laptop, pale eyes suddenly sharp. What are you saying? They're hired killers. Mary gasped, each word costing her everything. Sent by Thornton Pharmaceuticals to silence me before the Atlanta trial resumes. The pharmaceutical executive who killed Dad, Richard Marsh, he's paying them to eliminate me and anyone who knows what I know. Those photos are digitally fabricated. The thumb drive is planted evidence to turn you against me. It's all a setup. Marcus struggled to his knees, vision swimming, and looked at Carlson with new eyes. The man's suit was too expensive, too tailored. His shoes were spotless despite the dirt and debris. His hands showed no calluses, no scars, not the hands of someone who'd worked their way up through law enforcement's ranks. Like and subscribe now, because you need to see who the real enemy is. Carlson's expression didn't change, remaining professionally neutral, but something flickered deep in his eyes. Something cold and calculated and completely devoid of anything resembling justice or law. Ms. Brennan, you're delirious from blood loss and trauma, Carlson said smoothly, voice dripping with false concern, making wild, paranoid accusations against federal law enforcement officers. It's a common symptom of shock. Then prove you're real agents, Mary challenged, voice strengthening despite her catastrophic injuries, despite the blood pooling beneath her. Call your field office right now. Provide badge numbers for verification. Let Reaper verify your credentials through federal law enforcement databases. Every real agent has a digital footprint. Call someone. Prove who you are. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Marcus counted them, his own heart hammering against his cracked ribs. 1, 2, 3. Then Carlson smiled, and it was the single most terrifying thing Marcus had ever seen in 14 years of life that included beatings, abandonment, and watching his mother die. It was a smile that said the game was over. The pretense was done. The masks were coming off. I'm afraid we're well past that point, Ms. Brennan. Carlson's hand moved inside his jacket with practiced smoothness. Gunfire erupted. Not from Carlson's weapon, from the SUVs. The tinted windows exploded outward in showers of safety glass as automatic weapons opened up from inside all three vehicles simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like strobe lights in a nightmare club. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, a wall of noise that physically pressed against Marcus's eardrums. Bikers dove for cover in every direction. Motorcycles sparked and shattered as bullets tore through chrome and leather and fiberglass. Men screamed, some in rage, some in pain, some in the wordless terror of sudden violence. Blood sprayed in dark arcs across metal and earth. The carefully maintained formation dissolved into chaos as 500 bikers suddenly realized they weren't facing federal agents, but professional killers who'd been waiting for the perfect moment to execute them all. Marcus threw himself over Mary without thinking, covering her broken body with his own scrawny frame as rounds whipped overhead with sounds like angry hornets. He felt something tug sharply at his jacket, a bullet passing close enough to tear fabric but missing flesh by millimeters. Reaper had his weapon out, a massive pistol that barked thunder as he returned fire alongside his brothers. They used overturned motorcycles as cover, firing from behind chrome and steel that sparked with incoming rounds. The sound was apocalyptic, weapons from both sides creating a cacophony that drowned out thought, drowned out everything except survival instinct. Through the chaos and smoke and muzzle flashes, through the screaming and dying, Marcus saw something that made his blood freeze solid in his veins. One of Reaper's men wasn't taking cover. The lieutenant with Enforcer on his chest. The one who'd kicked Marcus, who'd accused him of being Mary's accomplice, wasn't returning fire at the SUVs. He stood apart from the battle, positioned behind a line of motorcycles, but not using them for protection. He held a radio pressed against his ear with one hand, speaking calmly into it, his face illuminated by the device's screen glow. Calm. Completely, utterly calm while bullets flew and brothers died around him. Marcus watched the man's lips move, couldn't hear the words over the gunfire, but read them clear as day through the smoke. Target acquired. Finish them all. The lieutenant's eyes swept methodically across the battlefield, calculating angles, counting bodies, assessing damage with the cold precision of someone evaluating mission success. Then those eyes locked directly onto Marcus, and the man smiled. A smile that said he knew Marcus had seen him. A smile that said it didn't matter because witnesses don't survive massacres. A smile that promised death was coming. The lieutenant raised his own weapon. Not toward the fake agents in the SUVs, but angling it carefully toward Reaper's exposed back as the club president focused all his attention on Carlson's kill team. Marcus opened his mouth to scream a warning, but another explosion drowned out his voice as one of the motorcycle's fuel tanks detonated from sustained fire. The blast sent a fireball 20 feet into the air, superheated air washing over everyone, turning night into day for 3 seconds of blinding light. When the smoke cleared enough to see through, the lieutenant was gone, vanished into the chaos like a ghost. And Reaper was bleeding from his shoulder, spinning around in confusion and pain, trying to locate where the unexpected shot had come from, his face twisted with betrayal. The mole wasn't working with the pharmaceutical company. The mole wasn't working with the fake federal agents. The mole was inside the Hells Angels, had been for God knew how long, and he'd just fired the opening shot of a civil war that would tear the club apart from within. Marcus pressed himself flat against the overturned Harley, the metal still radiating heat from the engine that had been running minutes before. Bullets punched through chrome inches from his head, each impact sending sparks and fragments of shattered metal spinning through the smoke-thick air. The sound was continuous, overlapping, a symphony of death that made his teeth ache and his skull feel like it was splitting apart. The fake federal agents had superior position, superior firepower, superior training, and the element of surprise that had already cost a dozen bikers their lives in the opening seconds. 3 SUVs formed a semicircle of death around the crash site, each vehicle bristling with automatic weapons that poured fire into the biker formation with the kind of professional precision that spoke of military training. These weren't thugs. These weren't ordinary hired guns. These were operators, and they'd turned this Indiana cornfield into a kill zone. Reaper crouched low beside Marcus and Mary, one massive hand pressed hard against his bleeding shoulder while the other gripped his pistol, returning fire with methodical discipline. His face was carved from granite, expression locked down tight, but Marcus could see the calculation happening behind those pale blue eyes. Counting rounds, counting casualties, counting seconds, measuring their chances of survival with each passing heartbeat. The math wasn't good. The math was terrible. "We're pinned down," one of Reaper's men shouted from behind a motorcycle 15 feet away, voice raw with desperation. "Can't flank them without crossing 30 feet of open ground. It's a fucking shooting gallery." As if to emphasize the point with brutal clarity, another biker tried to advance toward better cover. He made it exactly 5 steps before 3 rounds stitched across his chest in a tight grouping that spoke of expert marksmanship. The man went down hard, body skidding across gravel and dirt, leaving a dark smear behind him. He didn't get back up. "How many magazines you got left?" Reaper shouted to his nearest brothers over the hammering gunfire. "2," came a voice from the right. "1," another called from behind a pile of shattered motorcycles. "3, but one's half empty, and I'm down to my backup piece." They were being systematically bled dry, ammunition running out while the enemy had barely slowed their rate of fire. Carlson's team was rotating shooters, maintaining sustained suppression while others reloaded. Professional, efficient, deadly. This wasn't a firefight anymore. It was an execution drawing itself out, savoring the killing. Marcus looked down at Mary beneath him, her face gone gray and slick with cold sweat despite the November chill. Her breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps that didn't seem to be bringing in enough oxygen. She was fading, blood loss and shock dragging her consciousness down toward a darkness she might not come back from. They'd survived the helicopter crash, survived the explosion, only to die here in an Indiana cornfield, killed by people wearing federal agent costumes like it was Halloween. Then movement caught Marcus's eye through a gap in the smoke. The enforcer. Axel, the lieutenant who'd smiled at Marcus with that promise of death, who'd shot Reaper in the back during the chaos, emerged from behind a curtain of smoke 30 yards to the right. He moved with purpose, weapon up, eyes scanning. He wasn't alone. 3 other bikers flanked him, moving in coordinated formation that didn't match the chaos and panic around them. Their movements were too smooth, too synchronized, like they'd rehearsed this. They weren't panicking, weren't scattered and desperate like the others. They were advancing with military precision toward where Reaper was pinned down, and their weapons weren't aimed at the SUVs. They were aimed at their president. "Reaper!" Marcus screamed, voice cracking with urgency. "Your right flank. It's Axel." Reaper spun fast, weapon tracking toward the new threat, but Axel was already in position. His gun was aimed, finger already tightening on the trigger, center mass shot on his own president. A motorcycle fuel tank exploded between them without warning. The blast was enormous, a fireball that climbed 20 feet into the night sky and sent a shockwave rippling outward that knocked everyone within 30 feet to the ground. Marcus felt his lungs compress, felt heat wash over him like opening an oven door. His ears rang with a frequency so high it felt like an ice pick drilling into his brain. When he could see again through streaming, smoke-irritated eyes, Axel stood in the exact center of the blast radius, somehow unscathed. His weapon was trained with absolute steadiness directly at Reaper's head, execution style. Everybody stopped firing. Axel's voice boomed with command authority that cut through the chaos. "Stop shooting right now, or your president dies where he kneels. I'll put 3 rounds through his skull before anyone can pull a trigger." The bikers hesitated, caught between loyalty to their president and the survival instinct screaming at them to keep fighting. Weapons wavered. Fingers eased off triggers. One by one, their guns lowered. The gunfire from the SUVs ceased as well, settling into an eerie, oppressive silence broken only by the groaning of wounded men and the crackling of fires consuming expensive motorcycles. Carlson emerged from behind one of the vehicles, moving with casual confidence now that the shooting had stopped. He brushed dust from his expensive suit with meticulous care, like he was preparing for a business meeting rather than standing in the middle of a massacre. "Thank you, Axel," Carlson said smoothly. "Right on schedule. Excellent work." Axel. So that was the trader's real name, not just a road name. "Pleasure doing business," Axel said, still not taking his eyes off Reaper, weapon rocksteady. "Though you could have mentioned you'd be bringing this much firepower to the party. Lost some good men here tonight. Brothers I rode with." His voice held no remorse, just mild annoyance, like complaining about traffic. "Acceptable losses," Carlson said with the tone of someone discussing quarterly earnings rather than human lives. The contract specified elimination of Reaper and Mary Brennan, plus any witnesses who could compromise the operation. "I always fulfill my contracts completely. It's why I command premium rates." Reaper's face twisted with a betrayal that cut deeper than any bullet wound, deeper than the hole in his shoulder still bleeding through his fingers. "How long, Axel?" His voice came out strangled. "How long have you been selling out your brothers?" 3 years, Axel said with casual pride, like boasting about a successful business venture. "Ever since you passed me over for vice president. Ever since you promoted that idiot Torch to VP instead of me. 3 years of watching you make weak decisions that compromised our territory, while I could have made us the strongest chapter in the Midwest." He gestured broadly with his free hand at the assembled bikers, at the dead and dying scattered across the ground. "So when Thornton Pharmaceuticals offered me $2 million to deliver you and your sister on a silver platter, I took the deal without hesitation. Easy money for easy work. And as a bonus, I get to rebuild this club the right way after you're dead and buried. No more weak leadership. No more mercy for enemies." His smile was ugly, triumphant. Mary struggled to lift her head, neck muscles straining with the effort. "The poison," she whispered, voice barely audible. Then louder. "Tell him about the poison, you arrogant idiot." Axel's smile faltered slightly. "What poison?" "The contaminated fuel additives." Mary's voice grew stronger, fueled by desperate urgency and rage. "You think Thornton is paying you $2 million to take over the club? You think they're making you rich? They're using you as an unwitting distribution network for a bioweapon that's already infected 12 Hell's Angels chapters across the country." She coughed violently, blood spraying from her lips, but kept talking. "Symptoms start in 72 hours from first exposure. Hand tremors, memory gaps, cognitive decline, loss of motor control. Then organ failure cascades. Fatal within 1 week from symptom onset. And you've been handling that fuel, filling those tanks, breathing those fumes for 6 months." Mary's eyes locked onto Axel with fierce intensity. "Reaper's men are already dying, and they don't even know it yet. The fuel you've been running through our supply chain for the past 6 months? Every gallon is laced with a slow-acting neurotoxin derived from experimental CRISPR gene therapy research, the same research that killed our father. Every bike that's been filled up at our contracted service stations is contaminated. Every rider exposed." The color drained from Axel's face like water from a broken glass. "You're lying. This is a trick." "Am I?" Mary's laugh was bitter, broken, edged with hysteria. "Check your hands right now. Any tremors yet? Any moments where you forgot where you parked your bike? Any times this week you couldn't remember a brother's name? The symptoms start subtle. You won't even notice the deterioration until your kidneys start shutting down." Axel's gun hand did tremble visibly, but whether from the neurotoxin or from sudden fear was impossible to tell. Carlson stepped forward, completely unperturbed by the revelation, even looking mildly amused. "MS. Brennan is absolutely correct, of course. The neurotoxin was specifically engineered to be undetectable during the incubation period. Late-stage symptoms emerge suddenly, and by that point, cellular damage is catastrophically irreversible. Quite elegant, really." He smiled at Axel with the cold amusement of someone watching a particularly entertaining movie. "You didn't actually think we'd let you live to spend that $2 million, did you? You're infected just like the rest of your brothers. The money was payment for a suicide mission you didn't know you were on. You've been dead for months. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Axel's face went from pale to gray to nearly green. You said, the contract specifically said, like and subscribe before this secret kills you too. The contract said we'd pay you $2 million, which we deposited into your offshore account exactly as specified. Carlson interrupted with bureaucratic precision. We never said you'd live long enough to spend it. Details matter in contract law. He checked his watch with theatrical precision, like timing a souffle. You've been symptomatic for approximately 3 days already based on our exposure timeline calculations. In 4 more days, you'll be dead, along with approximately 600 Hell's Angels members across the continental United States. Your deaths have been extremely profitable. Thornton Pharmaceuticals invested heavily in mortuary services stocks 6 months ago. Your funerals will generate excellent returns for our shareholders. The assembled bikers erupted in angry shouts, weapons rising despite Axel's threats, but Carlson's team responded with lightning speed. Warning shots cracked over their heads, close enough that several men ducked instinctively. The only cure that exists anywhere in the world, Carlson continued over the noise, raising his voice slightly, is contained in Mary Brennan's research notes, which is precisely why she has to die tonight before she can synthesize and distribute an antidote. Dead scientists don't save lives. Reaper stared at his sister with new understanding dawning behind his eyes, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. That's why you went into witness protection. Not to betray us. To save us. I've been working on an antidote for 8 months using Dad's medical records and autopsy results, Mary said, voice growing weaker again. I was so close, so goddamn close. But I needed to identify the exact distribution network first, needed to know which supply chains were compromised. The Mongols meetings Carlson showed you? Those were part of my investigation. They're not involved in this at all. Thornton just used their club as a convenient frame, fabricated evidence to turn you against me, so I'd have no protection when they came to kill me. She coughed again, whole body convulsing with the effort, blood soaking through Marcus's hands where he still pressed against her wounds. The antidote formula is in my head. All the research, all the trials. But there's a critical problem. Her eyes filled with tears that cut tracks through the blood and dirt on her face. With the equipment and rare compounds currently available, I can only synthesize enough antidote for one single person. The synthesis requires platinum group catalysts, specific temperature controls, reagents that take weeks to acquire. Large-scale production would take 6 months, minimum, we absolutely don't have. The implications settled over everyone like a funeral shroud, suffocating and final. One person, Reaper repeated, voice completely hollow. One antidote. Out of 600 infected brothers. I was supposed to present my research to the FDA's Emergency Authorization Committee next month, Mary whispered. Force them to issue emergency manufacturing approval, requisition government resources for mass production. But Thornton found out about the presentation. That's why they sabotaged the helicopter tonight. Why they sent Carlson and his kill team. Marcus's mind raced through impossible scenarios, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. One antidote. 600 dying bikers. Mary barely alive. Reaper wounded and bleeding. Carlson's team surrounding them with overwhelming firepower and absolutely no intention of letting anyone leave this cornfield alive. They were trapped in a situation with no good options, no clever escapes, no cavalry coming to save them. Then Marcus felt something pressing against his chest where he'd been lying protectively over Mary. Something small, hard, rectangular, attached to her hospital scrubs right over her sternum. He looked down slowly, carefully, and his blood turned to liquid nitrogen in his veins. A small black device, no bigger than a deck of playing cards, was adhered to the fabric over Mary's heart. A tiny LED light blinked red with mechanical, merciless regularity. Once per second, counting down to something terrible. Marcus's fingers trembled violently as he reached for the device, peeling back his jacket to see it clearly, and that's when he saw the digital display embedded in the black plastic. 128. 127. 126. 1 minute 26 seconds. 1 minute 25 seconds. There's a bomb, Marcus whispered, voice barely audible. Then louder, cracking with terror. "There's a bomb on Mary." Reaper's eyes widened, pale blue going nearly white. "When did they?" "The crash," Mary gasped, understanding flooding her face with horrified clarity. "When I was unconscious after the initial impact. They were there first, before you arrived with the club. They had time to." Carlson's smile widened into something genuinely delighted. "Insurance policy. Did you really think we'd risk any of you surviving to tell this story? The device contains enough C4 to vaporize everyone within a 20-foot radius. Quite effective." The timer kept counting with relentless mechanical precision. 1:15, 1:14, 1:13. Marcus's hands moved to the device, fingers slipping on blood and sweat, trying desperately to pry it free from the fabric. But it was adhered with industrial-strength adhesive, the kind used in military applications. His fingers couldn't get purchase, couldn't grip, just kept sliding uselessly. "Get it off her," Reaper shouted, dropping his weapon and lunging forward. "I'm trying." Marcus's voice cracked into a sob. "It won't come off." 58, 57, 56. The device was stuck like it had been welded to her skin, and Mary was too weak to help, too broken to do anything but lie there and watch death count down in glowing red numbers. If it detonated here, it would kill Mary instantly, would kill Marcus, would kill Reaper and anyone within 20 feet, which meant at least a dozen more brothers. Marcus made a decision. His hands closed around the device, and he pulled with every ounce of strength in his 90-pound frame. The adhesive gave slightly, peeling away from fabric and skin with a wet, tearing sound that made Mary scream in agony. 43, 42, 41. Marcus ripped it free completely, leaving a raw, bleeding patch on Mary's chest where skin had come away with the adhesive, and clutched the bomb against his own chest with both hands. Then he ran. Marcus ran like he'd never run before in his life, legs pumping beneath him with desperate speed. 40 seconds on the timer. His scrawny muscles burned as he sprinted away from Mary, away from Reaper, away from the assembled bikers who stared in frozen shock as a 14-year-old homeless kid clutched a bomb to his chest and ran toward the empty cornfield. 35 seconds. Behind him, Reaper's voice roared across the distance. "Kid, drop it. Just drop it and run." But Marcus had done the math in the split second before he'd started running. The blast radius was 20 feet minimum, probably more. If he dropped it now and tried to get clear, he'd still be inside the kill zone. So would half the bikers watching. The only way anyone survived was if he got this thing as far away as possible before it detonated. Distance. He needed distance. 30 seconds. His lungs screamed for air that wouldn't come fast enough. His ribs, cracked from Axel's brutal kick, sent lightning bolts of agony through his chest with every gasping breath. The corn stalks whipped past him on both sides, brittle and dead from autumn, slashing at his face and arms like reaching claws. 25 seconds. He remembered every night he'd spent freezing on Chicago streets, curled in doorways while pedestrians stepped over him like he was garbage. Every beating he'd survived from his mother's boyfriends. Every time an adult had looked through him like he was invisible, like homeless kids were just urban debris to be swept away and forgotten. Mary had looked at him differently, had actually seen him. 20 seconds. Marcus's foot caught on uneven ground, a root or rock hidden in darkness, and he stumbled forward violently, arms windmilling. The bomb slipped in his blood-slick hands. For one heart-stopping moment it was falling, and then he caught it against his chest, kept running, legs churning through sheer desperate will. 15 seconds. He thought about his mother, wondered if she'd be proud or horrified or if she'd even care, wherever her overdosed spirit had ended up. Thought about the foster homes he'd run from, the caseworkers who'd given up on him, the teachers who'd written him off as another statistic destined for prison or death. 10 seconds. Marcus wanted to matter, wanted his life to count for something more than being another dead kid in a case file that nobody would read. If he was going to die tonight, and the math said he probably was, then at least it would be saving people instead of just fading away unnoticed. 5 seconds. He was far enough now. Had to be. Marcus planted his feet, spun around to face the distant fires of the crash site, and hurled the bomb skyward with everything he had left in his 14-year-old body. The device tumbled end over end through the air, red light blinking its mechanical countdown, climbing toward the stars. 3 seconds. Marcus hit the ground hard, arms over his head, mouth open to equalize pressure like he'd learned in some long-ago school safety drill before his life had fallen apart. 2 seconds. 1. The explosion turned night into day, a miniature sun blooming in the Indiana sky. The shockwave hit him like being struck by a car, lifting him completely off the ground and slamming him back down with bone-rattling force. Sound ceased to exist, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that filled his entire skull like someone had stuck an air horn directly in his brain. Heat washed over him in waves, singeing the hair on his arms and neck. Debris rained down. Chunks of metal casing, scorched earth, fragments of things he couldn't identify and didn't want to. Something sharp and burning hot tore through his jacket and buried itself deep in his back between his shoulder blades. Then another piece of shrapnel, lower down near his spine. Then a third, tearing through muscle. Marcus tried to scream, but no sound came out through his deafened ears. Then darkness swallowed him whole, merciful and complete. When consciousness returned, seconds or minutes or hours later, impossible to tell, Marcus was lying face down in churned, smoking earth. Everything hurt with a comprehensiveness that was almost impressive. His back felt like someone had laid hot coals across his spine and then hammered nails through them. He couldn't hear anything except that endless, maddening ringing. Hands grabbed him gently, rolling him over with careful precision. Reaper's face swam into view above him, mouth moving frantically, shouting something Marcus couldn't hear through the damage to his ears. Then other faces crowded in. Bikers surrounding him, and several of them had tears cutting tracks through smoke-stained faces. Hard men who'd probably never cried in their adult lives were weeping openly as they looked down at the kid who'd saved them. Mary was there too, somehow, impossibly. Someone had fashioned an improvised stretcher from motorcycle parts and leather vests, and she lay on it pale but alive, still breathing despite everything. Her hand reached across the distance for Marcus, found his, squeezed with desperate gratitude and something that looked like love. The fake federal agents were gone, dead or fled into the night. Marcus didn't know and didn't have the energy to care. Axel lay zip-tied and face down in the dirt 20 yards away, 3 massive bikers standing guard over him with weapons drawn and expressions that promised violence if he so much as twitched. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Real ones this time. Marcus could feel the vibrations even if he couldn't hear them properly. Ambulances, police, fire trucks. Help was coming. Reaper lifted Marcus like he weighed absolutely nothing, cradling the boy against his chest as he ran toward the approaching emergency vehicles, boots pounding the earth. Marcus's vision swam, darkness creeping in at the edges like ink spreading through water. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. He'd saved them. That was his last thought before unconsciousness claimed him again, pulling him down into dreamless black. Marcus woke 3 days later in a hospital bed at Indiana University Health in Indianapolis. The first thing he noticed was the absence of pain, which was startling after 3 days of agony. They had him on serious drugs, the kind that made everything soft and distant and wrapped in cotton. The second thing he noticed was the machines. Monitors beeping steadily, for lines running into his arm, bandages wrapped around his entire torso. The third thing he noticed was Reaper, asleep in an uncomfortable chair beside the bed, massive arm in a sling, beard still stained with smoke and dried blood he hadn't bothered washing out. When Marcus stirred slightly, Reaper's eyes snapped open instantly, pale blue and alert despite having clearly not slept properly in days. "Kid, you're awake. Thank Christ. Don't try to move. Your back's shredded with shrapnel. Surgeons spent 9 hours pulling metal fragments out of you." Marcus's voice came out as a dry croak. "Mary, alive. ICU, 2 floors up. Stable condition. Doctors say she'll make a full recovery." Reaper's hand, scarred, massive, surprisingly gentle, gripped Marcus's shoulder carefully. "You saved her life, kid. Saved a lot of lives. 200 brothers owe you everything. Axel? The poison. Axel's in federal custody. Real federal custody this time. We verified credentials on everyone. Reaper's face hardened into something carved from stone. He's singing like a canary about Thornton Pharmaceuticals. The contaminated fuel, the neurotoxin distribution network, the whole operation. Gave up names, locations, everything to cut a deal. Like and subscribe, because this ending will restore your faith in humanity. Relief flooded through Marcus, warm and overwhelming. Then everyone's okay? The poison stopped. That's the incredible part. Reaper leaned forward, and for the first time Marcus could remember, the massive biker was actually smiling. Mary's been working with the CDC nonstop from her hospital bed. Turns out when you threaten to wipe out 600 people, the federal government mobilizes resources pretty damn fast. He pulled out his phone, showed Marcus a news article with the headline, FDA grants emergency authorization for life-saving antidote. Mary's formula got fast-tracked through every bureaucratic channel that exists, Reaper explained. The contaminated fuel evidence from Axel's testimony, combined with blood tests showing 200 people actively infected, the FDA had no choice. They issued emergency manufacturing authorization within 48 hours. Marcus's eyes widened. So there's enough antidote? For everyone. For everyone. Reaper's smile grew. 3 pharmaceutical companies are manufacturing it right now under government contract. First doses shipped yesterday. Every infected biker gets treated within the week. The EPA's testing every fuel station in the country, shutting down contaminated supply chains. Thornton Pharmaceuticals is done. Criminal charges filed, assets frozen, executive board arrested. Tears blurred Marcus's vision. We actually did it. You did it, kid. Reaper's voice went rough with emotion. Your sacrifice. Running with that bomb, it bought us time. If you'd frozen up, if you dropped it, Mary would have died. I would have died. The evidence would have died with us. Thornton would have gotten away clean, and 600 brothers would be dead within a month. He squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently. Instead, you're a hero. Mary's testifying before Congress next month about pharmaceutical corruption. The club's being credited with exposing a bioweapon plot. And you? Reaper paused, choosing his words carefully. Your family now. Official. Legal guardian papers are being processed. You're not going back to the streets or foster care. You're coming home with me. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. Family. Home. Words he'd stopped believing in months ago. Mary's moving in too. Once she's recovered, Reaper continued. Getting her out of witness protection now that Thornton's neutralized. The 3 of us, we're starting over. Clean. Together. The door opened, and Mary appeared in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, for pole attached. She looked pale and fragile, but her eyes were bright and clear. When she saw Marcus awake, tears spilled down her cheeks. You stupid, brave, incredible kid, she whispered, rolling close enough to take his hand. You gave me a second chance. Gave all of us a second chance. You gave me a first chance, Marcus replied, voice breaking. Nobody else ever did. Over the next 3 weeks, as Marcus healed in that hospital room, the full scope of what they'd accomplished became clear. The neurotoxin plot made national news. Thornton Pharmaceutical CEO was indicted on 17 federal charges, including attempted murder, conspiracy, and bioterrorism. Mary became a whistleblower hero, her testimony dismantling one of the largest pharmaceutical corruption cases in U.S. history. The Hells Angels, instead of being vilified, were praised for their role in exposing the plot. Reaper testified before Senate committees about the attack, about corporate criminals targeting American citizens. And Marcus, the homeless kid nobody had noticed, became the face of redemption. News outlets ran stories about the 14-year-old who'd saved 200 lives. Fundraisers organized by grateful bikers raised enough money to establish a youth shelter in Chicago in his name. On the day Marcus was finally discharged, Reaper and Mary brought him to a house in suburban Indianapolis. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a home. It's ours, Mary said simply. All of ours. Marcus stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. 6 weeks ago he'd been sleeping behind dumpsters, convinced he'd die forgotten on those streets. Now he had a family. "Welcome home, kid," Reaper said, hand heavy and warm on Marcus's shoulder. And for the first time in his life, Marcus actually believed that home was real.